session, and we will start with roll call. Or so.
Sorry.
Coiner.
Here.
Dasso. Who? Kefauver.
Here.
Meyer.
Here.
Peterson. Here. Powell.
Here.
Powers.
Here.
Schurtz.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. With a quorum, we'll move on to approval of our last meeting's minutes. That was September 9th. Now I've got September with us. And so I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I make a motion
Okay,
to accept this.
it's been moved and seconded. Our vote would be, for those accepting, say yay.
Yes.
And for nay, anyone? Thank you. Those minutes have been passed. Public comment, we will not have today because we have no one requesting comment at this time and no business. So we're into new business at this time. And the first on the agenda is the Fiscal Year 26 Park Development Program Final Slate.
Yeah, so in your packet, you have we completed the scoring with you guys and as well as city council, those were compiled. And this is the order of the rankings. So basically, unless you have any further questions about any of the proposed projects, we just need a motion for approval.
I'll move that we approve the park development program scores.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the Park Development Program report. Those indicating yes, say yes.
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 Abstentions or no? We'll move on then. That sounds like we have moved into our next agenda item. And that is as follows. I need to get my paper in place here. The bylaw review. And what we're working from is the information that you were sent through email. And the request was that we had come with that thoroughly read. And so at this point, let's remember that this is not an action for voting approval, but it's a time to gather information. If you have questions about the revisions that you read in the bylaws, to share those at this time. Let's start with the bylaws as they were sent in a revised form.
Madam Chair, if I can just
Yes,
interject one
sure.
thing. I'm going to let Jessica just sort of give you a little background as to why this is coming before you right now. It's primarily language updates and some changes to the open meeting law, just update, but I'll let her walk through why you're getting this now.
Well, thank you. We'll do that.
So our bylaws were last updated in May of 2021 when we went from, I believe, Tuesday meetings to Thursday. We adjusted our time to make it a little easier for everybody to attend. Because of the new update to the state guidelines of a virtual or a call-in option, we did have to edit the bylaws as written. As I was going through those, I did see some conflicting information from what websites to access to what the roles that our elected positions play. So I took a moment and I updated everything to more match the current workings of the board. So we'll do the bylaws today in two parts. The first one is we'll start with just my corrections, and if you guys have any revisions to those. And then once that everybody's happy with those, then we'll go to additional suggested changes, whether those are adds, additions, or changing wording. Once we get done today, I will, based on your feedback, I will draft a full copy that's going to be run through the city's legal department, just to make sure we're in compliance and not doing anything a little too wild. And then in November, I will bring a final version back for you guys to review and adopt.
With that being said, welcome. Welcome any suggestions or changes that you feel are important with those areas where there was clearly red indicating the changes. Are there any?
I just have a comment. I know that on a previous commission that I served, we were able to do virtual meetings, and I know you're following the council. I just wish that there was that option for us as well. I think any methods that we can do to encourage people to be a part of it are good, but I appreciate your explaining the situation.
I had one, this is a longstanding concern that I had, and I mentioned it before. Under our agenda, I would prefer that under item 7, report, it says staff report, and we do have reports from our assigned liaison, and so I would just like to see that generally noted as reports. And you'll find that under, yeah. Yeah, so it just would be reports, which means it could include not only our staff reports, which we expect, and Chris's report, but we may have special committees or other assigned information that we know that we'll be expecting reports back. So it's a more general term to include reports that we receive and comment and take action if needed. Other suggestions or additions just to what we see in red? I'll ask, shall we move on to suggestions that go beyond these revisions as proposed that would have an effect with our bylaws? I have a suggestion, and it really reflects on the last application process as someone who requested to have our assignment renewed. You know, our alderman directs or suggests or reviews, et cetera. And so what I see is missing that I had to really wade through is things like maybe a special section that gives us the detail as a board member on how we expressed our interest to renew our application and duties as a board member. And within that, it might include notification. How are we notified? Who does it? Who's in charge with the city of Davenport? We find out maybe yes or maybe no. At the application process, if you want to continue on the board member, and so the renewal process. So there's several things that would need to be filtered out, but it would be clear that we would know from our bylaws how we would continue in our capacity if we're interested as a board member. And that includes actually how the information gets to our alderman, and the alderman is the person who initiates and supports. So there's lots of stuff in there. So that's what I would like to see added.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that, that I mean, because like I was appointed by JJ, and now I'm technically the representative of Jasmine, who I don't really know, and I guess I don't know how that works as far as if she has to decide to reappoint me or not, or et cetera. A little more clarity on that, I think would be good.
And I think too, if an alderman reaches out to somebody and they don't respond to them, perhaps there's something explanation on how that moves forward.
Isn't this the duty of the alderman?
Yeah, so I think part of the issue has been most recently to what Wendy's alluded to, the communication on application and the process is largely attributable to the turnover on administration in City Hall, to be frank. The former executive assistant sort of managed the process for the elected officials, so, and would typically communicate out to applicants and others, you know, where they were in the process and all that. I need to go back, or Jessica or I will need to go back and sort of see. I think they're still sort of working through how that process is gonna continue, because that position technically was sort of modified a little bit in their duties, and, you know, there may be some input from the incoming city administrator on that process as well. But, yes, typically the ward alderman reviews the applications, or the at-large alderman and the mayor, because each one of them has an appointee, and then makes a recommendation. And then all appointments go on city council agenda for approval. But typically, yes, the ward alderman has oversight into the selection process and review of applications.
If when you think you get, as a new member, a handbook, it would sure nice to know how long you served, make it very clear that that's what you accept as a board member. And, you know, most of us like to continue. You know, it's one thing, but we need to be active in making it happen successfully.
I think the question is what she's asking is if, can the bylaws direct that? And I'm not sure if you can.
Yeah, that'll be part of the legal department's review of them. You know, we'll bring it forward and say, hey, there's been a question from our board regarding, can we put something in our bylaws about process or appointment, and what that looks like. So we'll look into it and find out.
When I was onboarded, I was asked by Robbie Ortiz, well, when he transitioned out and Jay transitioned in, I contacted her. It was on something else, but I let her know that I'm her representative here. And between Robbie and a little bit of her, I'm not sure that they are even clear themselves that there's a civil rights board and there's this board and that, because certain boards, they can't just appoint people to. So I kind of got the feeling that they know of a couple of them, don't really know. So I guess, claimed my seat. So poor Jade, sorry.
I've been around 10 years now, I think. And I have a good relationship with my alderman. And I suggest if you don't have a relationship or a lot of conversations with them, Rick and I talk about it all the time, of what we can do and what we can't do, what we can do, what we should do, and all those kind of things. And we bring that up. So there's constant contact. And I would think that if I wasn't doing what I should be doing or asking the questions that I shouldn't be doing, obviously I shouldn't be on this board. That's my question, is that if you're not making contact with your alderman, I'm not saying that you're not, I'm just saying it would be much, much better if you had that conversation with them and talking to them all the time. There's always something going on. So, okay, thanks. Just a point.
Yeah, thank you. Are there other suggestions that we would add to our work between now and November?
I just have an observation. I know with the HPC Commission, we actually wrote down ballots and turned them in like secret ballots when we did voting for officers. And that was my first meeting here, is when you did officers. So just something to throw out there, that you all know each other and you were all, it appeared to be prepared to move forward with whoever you wanted in office. But that was just an option that we exercised.
Are we ready to move on to the budget this time?
Yeah.
So we
So
have,
I'm sorry, Wendy, I just want to be clear so that you guys can redirect me as, so all of the drafted changes in red will be removed and the black content will stay. Under section 2.5, order of business, number 7, instead of staff reports, we're just changing that to reports in general. And then we will draft a section 10 that will be centered around reappointment. And I heard 3 kind of categories: notification, application, and the renewal process. I'll work with Chad to draft those, and then again, we'll run that through third floor to see if that can stay in. Did we want, our bylaws currently don't say how we vote as a board, if it's a voice vote, if it's a ballot vote. Do we want to clarify that? Do we want to leave this kind of more open and general?
I mean, section 2.6 says voting will be by voice roll call called by the secretary and will be recorded by yea or nay or abstaining. So it's somewhat there already.
That's for our normal, business actions,
Are you talking about the?
for the election.
For the nomination, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Christine brought up the point, and I'm not sure if you guys want me to have that in there or not.
We can draft a procedure, and we can also review other board bylaws to see if maybe they have language on that. I think we've just done it this way because we don't have language on the procedure, so I'm not opposed to, secret ballots or anything, but we can work on some, we can review some of the other ones. And then I would just note, like, if you take this home, digest it over the weekend or in the coming days, or something pops in your head, within the next couple weeks before to give us time to input any additional changes, feel free to send them to me or Jess, or any additional comments. And before we send it on to legal to review.
And per your bylaws, I have to give you updated copies 3 business days prior to our meeting. So in 2 weeks, I will send you the updated version for any more feedback, and then that will give legal about 10 business days to give us some feedback. Okay?
great,
Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
I'll just further comment. I think it depends too on the situation, because we had so many new people that we didn't know each other. So it was important for us to introduce ourselves and why we wanted the positions and what our backgrounds were, et cetera. So it's just a suggestion.
Moving on, yes, to the budget presentation.
Okay, so in your packet, you have this slideshow, but for new members and returning members, every October, we just do a high-level sort of overview, reminder of how our funding works, our budget, because this is the time of year we're going through the process, right? So the city process for budget typically kicks off September-ish and goes all the way through budget adoption sometime in April or May with council. The budget workshops that council holds on Saturdays to review operating, CIP, and goal setting have traditionally been held in January. Last year, they were pivoted to February, but I would assume they'll be in and around January or February this year. So from September to about that time, city staff, this is when we're working through inputting our operational budget requests and CIP requests. So let's see if this works. Hey, all right. So really, we talk about two basic budget areas. One is our operating budget. So this is what we use for pretty much our day-to-day operations. It's primarily funded through the general fund, as well as grants and local sales tax. So this is all our employee expenses, our supplies, and small capital outlay. And then the city has a 6-year capital improvement program, or CIP. These are large construction capital projects are funded through this. Primarily funding sources are hotel motel tax, GO bonds, or local sales tax again. So those are sort of the two things we work on through the budget process. This chart is in our budget book every year, and this is just an overall breakdown of the department's budget. This was from the FY25 budget, which is the fiscal year we're currently in. Broken down by fund, by program area, and by object. You can see our operating budget has remained relatively flat. There was an amendment in FY25 or 24, excuse me. Our amended budget came in a little bit higher than what the original budget was, and that was primarily related to employee. We went through, which was a good thing, we went through a process where we were able to get our part-time wages increased. So that was reflected there. The reason you don't see it carry over into 25 because that process had already been done and this was printed. So hopefully with 26, you'll see that more accurate to what the 24 amended was. But again, our largest area of expense is our employees, and that's typical of any department. Again, we're largely funded through the general fund. We do have 3 other funds, 2 enterprise funds, the golf fund and the River's Edge fund. Youth sports is its own fund, self-sustaining. When we took over Dad's Club, it was set up that way, but it's not truly, I guess, looked at similar to golf and or River's Edge. It's still subsidized in some ways, but it covers most of its costs. So this is the breakdown, roughly $8.5 million operating budget on an annual basis. And like I said, it's been pretty flat for quite some time. Operating summary, I sort of went through some of this, but we manage about 36 acres of parkland. Approximately 60% of the budget comes from the general fund and trust and agency. Trust and agency, I don't know if that's a sort of weird term if you're not familiar with it, but that's basically employee benefits. So all our health insurance and that type of stuff is funded through trust and agency. Approximately 25% of the department's budget comes from the golf course. The golf fund accounts for about 25% of our operating, but again, that's an enterprise fund, not general fund. And then in FY25, we had a decrease of 2.65%. And that's primarily due to, we used to hire the employees for the Stepping Stones program for the school district. We were sort of a pass-through. We hired the employees. They paid us. It was a wash. There was no city obligation in that regard, but we were the employer for their employees. We gave that back to the school district, and now we are no longer employing the Stepping Stone employees. It's entirely back with the school district. So those dollars went away in the budget. That's what accounted for that decrease. Okay, enterprise funds, I sort of explained this a little bit, but so our golf fund and our River's Edge fund, they're self-sustaining is the easiest way to put it. Anything we get budgeted expense, we need to cover in revenue. Up until, I'll touch on golf a little bit further in the slides, but River's Edge in recent years, or the majority of the time that the city's owned it has operated in the red and has had a significant subsidy. When TBK came online, we saw a significant decline in our turf use. And we've spoken about the transition, and some of you are at the ribbon cutting, but we looked at the business model and had discussions with Visit Quad Cities and some other groups in the area, our hockey association, and in the master plan, if you remember, that was a high priority of the hockey association and our ice users was to bring that second rink back. And given that the turf was not generating the rentals that it had prior to TBK, that's when we started to really see an increase in our subsidy. And it got to the point where council wanted us to look at that pretty critically because the overall general fund of the city with the tax reform that the state did a year ago or so has impacted the general fund of the city. So it's pretty tight. So we went back, we made the recommendation to bring the second sheet of ice because we felt that was the market for us to operate. So going forward, we're projecting revenue growth and with that second sheet of ice to the point where we won't require a subsidy. Golf, on the other hand, well, this chart real quick just sort of shows you an overall breakdown of the CIP program in the city and what things are funded. Obviously, the largest area is streets. That's the blue. And then, what's the big red one? Sewers. So a lot of infrastructure money in the CIP program goes to city streets and sewers. Typically, in the 25, we're that small little 1.6% of the CIP program. However, in recent years, we were blessed with a lot of the ARPA funding to do a lot of improvements, but parks tends to be a lower priority when it comes to capital improvement. So part of the master plan process was to highlight that and to really sort of bring forth that to council to say, hey, we need to invest. We have aging infrastructure as well in our parks, and we're hoping to continue to advocate for that and see if we can't get a little bit bigger slice of that pie, right? The next slide is just sort of a list. Every year, like I mentioned, it's a 6-year program. The first year, which is the fiscal year that we go into, is the only year that is technically funded that we can actually spend out of. That everything else is future planned. So that FY25 column is all projects that are funded and underway. The park development program that you guys do annually review, that's an annual program that is funded every year. So that's in there as well. So this shifts and changes based on our requests and needs and all that sort of stuff. So golf. So this is sort of the exciting thing. Jerry, big smiles, Jerry. Here we go. So
Yay.
a picture tells 1,000 words, right? So the graph you're seeing, this is Duck Creek, and we have a slide for each of them, but golf was pretty flat, had a little bit of a growth there, and then was sort of declining, but we are starting to get back to early 90s, late 80s sort of revenue area. Not quite, but we're getting close. But basically, what this summarizes is that we've seen approximately about a 45% growth in revenue on our golf courses since 2019. And I jokingly told Jerry before the meeting that 2019, late 2018, 2019 is when I started. So,
And that's when it started to go up too. So great job.
but
Jim.
I'm not taking credit. Troy and his team have done a fantastic job of managing our golf courses. And it's a testament to the game itself that players are finding us again. And we really started seeing it. One of the, I think, if you could say a benefit of COVID was that got people more outdoors on the golf courses, right? And we started seeing a lot of players, new players, come back to the courses. So, also with Duck Creek, you can see on the side some of the future course improvements. Big priority with Duck Creek is the irrigation system is in dire need of replacement. We've done some improvements to the practice range and some of the tee stuff, reconfigured a hole in the wetlands in recent year. The other thing with Duck Creek, we really could utilize some funding would be to complete the continuous cart path throughout the whole course. None of our courses have what you would consider a full continuous cart path. It just helps. There's days we lose due to weather because we can't let carts out on the course. And if you have a continuous cart path, you can do cart path only stuff and still let people out. And any good modern course has that feature to it. So that is a priority not only at Duck Creek, but EMICE as well. This is EMICE's chart. Again, positive revenue growth, about 45% since 2019. The big thing here, we're working towards replacing the clubhouse. That's the big priority. We've started a fundraising campaign and have worked with a stakeholder committee and have conceptual designs on that. And then Red Hawk, which used to be, so within the golf fund, historically, EMICE has always performed well above the black. Duck Creek sort of broken even, and Red Hawk was in the red. But enough to cover our costs overall in the fund to be pretty close to in the black. Red Hawk is approaching being almost self-sufficient at this point with the growth it's had. So overall, the fund is up to the good of about $300,000 and continues to grow. So we're pretty pleased and happy with the way golf is going right now. And that concludes the budget overall, and I would entertain any questions you might have about process or numbers.
Earlier, you had talked about some of the things that you'd like to get done, and so we could get more money pushed over to the Parks Department. And one of the things that we could do as a board member is to continue to talk to our aldermen and give them the ideas that we have out of this board and what we'd like to do in the Parks Department. Because the more information we get to them, the more they start thinking about, well, gee, we maybe better start doing something about this. So I really enhance that we do that. And not only that, but get to know all of the officials. If you can know more than more aldermen, you can know all of them. I know a few of them now, and I'm always talking to them. So anyway, I appreciate what all you guys have done. The girls are just done a tremendous, I don't know how you get all that done by doing all of the cleanups and the mowing and all the stuff, and then plus do all these programs with that book. It's just unreal what you're doing. And I don't really think that the public knows what we all do, except for the ones that are involved.
Yeah.
That's another thing that we need to do is to get more people, like go to our ward meetings and bring those books and hand them out to people. And so it gives them the idea of what all we're doing, and then talk about the golf and all the other things. And it's just so much, it's just called communication. So thanks.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Jerry's comments, our biggest challenge continues to be operational staffing and maintenance of the parks, honestly. Our team, we manage them to the best of the resources we're given. And I think I mentioned this before, but back in 2009, 2010-ish, the city went through a big decrement, and at that time, we saw about 15 full-time employees cut out of the operation, and we shifted to a very part-time seasonal maintenance model. That's been a challenge to keep the wages up and just the labor market in general coming out of COVID, trying we just don't see the applicant pool we got at one point. So several years, we've actually left money on the table just because we couldn't get enough applicants to hire. But testament and kudos to our HR department. They've worked very closely with us to not only get our wages more competitive, but also we've done some reorging to get a couple more full-time people, and we continue to try to advocate for that. That would go a long way, particularly in the riverfront. And we do have some new money coming into the budget with Main Street Landing that was approved with council when they approved the plans and specs for that project. So we'll gain a couple new employees through that. That will help enhance the riverfront. But yeah, that continues to be, I think, our number one challenge. And then lifeguards, of course, with pools. And that's a nationwide thing. We just got back from Atlanta from the NRPA conference, and there's probably half a dozen sessions on hiring lifeguards and how do you get these people, right? Because we were fortunate this year. We've staffed up pretty good, and then we had some issues at the end of the year with some attrition and things that impacted our ability to keep the pools open. But staffing continues to be probably the biggest challenge for us.
In your meeting in Atlanta, Becca, didn't you have a presentation you did down there?
Yeah, I'll let Becca come up and
Yeah, what was that
tell
all
all
about?
about it.
Yeah.
She may have had somebody heckling them in the crowd, but
That was one of the notes I made on our staff reports. I said, trends, question mark? So share that if you have some ideas on how we mesh with master plan and what needs to be added.
So the presentation that we did at the National Parks and Rec Association's conference last week was in collaboration with Ally McWilliams, who works with city administration, and Sergeant Andrew Harris with Davenport PD. We have been, since one of the first initiatives Chad gave me when I came on was to, hey, reach out, they've got this really great program. I want to have parks involved with it somehow. And it's called the Good Neighbor Project. And it's a positive rebranding of Neighborhood Watch. So rather than everybody keeping an eye on their neighborhood from the inside their home, it's about bringing neighbors together. And we have neighborhood leaders who apply and sign up, and they are able to participate in a variety of ways. Some of them are very, very active and host monthly meetings with their neighbors. They attend all the city council meetings and then report back to their neighbors about what's happening in the city council meetings. Others host quarterly or biannual or annual block parties. And one of the first things that we did, Parks and Rec, in collaboration with them, was to help. Teresa was instrumental in this in writing a grant with the Regional Development Authority to purchase basically a special events trailer, which is a little bit smaller than the one that we have. And it has the supplies to host a medium-sized block party. So it's tables, chairs, pop-up tents, yard games, kids games. So it's because most of us don't have enough to host, 40 or 50 people. We don't have those in our own homes. But it's a way that they can host gatherings and build that community rather than everyone is behind their windows. So Sergeant Harris and I did a version of this presentation a couple of years ago at the state conference. And we applied for the national conference and was accepted. We had about 60 people who attended our session and had some really great discussions and questions with them. I appreciate all of my coworkers who showed up and did not heckle. And we ended up having a couple people who came up to us afterwards. One who specifically sought out our session because his city is creating a neighborhood watch program, and he wanted to take this to them as an alternative. So, and then the other good news is after our state session, Moline implemented a program similar to this. So Moline has Neighbors United, and it's a variation of this program. Thank you.
That's awesome. I'm going to the point of, do our aldermen know the detail that you just gave us about the program?
Yes, there's a handful of aldermen who are actually very involved with it and have invited Ally and Andrew Harris to speak on it. They've attended some of the block parties that are in their wards. So yes, it is something that there's been proclamations every year for the Good Neighbor Project, and yeah.
Okay. Good. Are we set?
Yep.
Chad,
Unless you have any, yeah, go
I
ahead.
had a question about your budget review.
Uh-huh.
On the capital, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
On the capital improvement program, the CIP, how do we get junior theater in this mix?
Yeah. So that was going to be part of my director's update, but I can go into it now. So as you're all aware, junior theater, the Annie Witt complex is under a conditional conveyance. The developer has received, I think, half of his funding, but had to reapply for his other funding. But long story short, that is forcing us, junior theater, to be relocated. So when that conveyance first came on in January, we started the process. We did a community meeting at Junior Theater. We've also done a series of surveys. We've formed a task force in partnership with our nonprofit arm, Junior Theater Inc., and started looking at sites, really. And one of the first ones that became sort of viable was the old Yonkers box at North Park Mall that has been vacant. So we evaluated that. We brought an architect firm on to do some cost estimating on what that build out would look like. Let me back up a step. So we're looking at basically two processes running simultaneously. One is based on the time crunch that we're on, is an interim location, just a temporary move to keep the day-to-day programs running, right? We have to, basically, per the conveyance agreement, we have to be out of the Annie Witt complex by like April of 2025. So, and then secondarily, looking at what that long-term vision or permanent solution might be. Dating back to the days of Mary Nicewander, the dream of Junior Theater has always been to have its own complex, right? Its own performing arts center. And I think that's still viable and part of the vision amongst the stakeholders in the group. So we looked at the Yonkers site, we did some cost estimating, and from an interim position, the space was simply just way out of code and was gonna be too cost prohibitive to bring it up for an interim space, like to the tune of about $15 million, right? Just to get it up to code compliance and to build out the rooms and spaces we need. And that didn't even include a theater, performance space. That was just classrooms, theater space, offices, everything we have on the Annie Witt for the day-to-day programs. So once we got that back, and the media ran with it a little bit prematurely. You may have read it in the paper a while back. Junior Theater is moving to the mall and all this sort of stuff, and got everybody all excited. And then we got some numbers back that were not exciting. So we pivoted from there. We looked at some different sites. We've looked at, we've talked to the school district about Sudlow Intermediate and if there was a possibility to build on with them, and they're simply too far along in their process. We looked at Select Medical, which is the old hospital next to the high school on Kimberly there. Too much, just conditionally too far gone. We've looked at the ground transportation center above the bus depot. There's a space that
Arts Academy.
Creative Arts Academy, thank you, had occupied for a while. That would be potentially viable for an interim spot. However, there's some concerns about parking and just, downtown in general. One area from an interim that has sort of come to the top is the AT&T call center, which is on Elmore Circle up by adjacent to Costco. It's vacant, but it's a newer building. It has adequate square footage. It's something that we could probably move in and at least operate and run classes with minimal investment to at least keep us going. So from an interim standpoint, and backing up a step, through the surveying and the input sessions we had with our stakeholders and the public, you know, we looked at areas of the town were a priority, like zones, 6 quadrants. We broke the city up and had them do a dot exercise on where they would like to see junior theater go. And this was in one of the higher ranking areas of town. So right now, staff is working through a memo that is actually going to go out to city council this Friday, end of day, with they've had a lot of questions about various options and costs associated with all this. And then next Wednesday, I believe they are planning to have an executive session following the meeting. And the reason it's an executive session because several of the potential sites could involve a real estate transaction. So if there's pending possible real estate transactions, they can discuss that in an executive session, not to hamper any sort of negotiations that may occur if that's the direction we're given. So that's sort of where we are in the process at this point. The other thing, so we've also worked with another architect firm to sort of cost estimate out what a brand new performing arts center may cost and size wise, and then we'll take that and sort of look at various parcels or areas of city-owned land that it may fit on. You know, we've talked about the parcel on 46 in Eastern. You know, we had the neighbors come and talk about their desire for the city to purchase that and develop a park. Well, there may be an opportunity there. So really, we're waiting for council to give us some sort of direction because I've had a lot of questions about the process, and we've tried to provide them with as much information as we can. So hopefully by this time next month, we will have a pretty firm direction on where junior theater is heading. So, and to couple that with Daniel Sheridan departing us, Teresa and I have probably spent, she left. She had another appointment. 50% of our time on this right now is going towards junior theater, trying to solve the problem and figure out next steps and what is going. But I will say we have great stakeholders. It's a beloved program. I'm confident that we'll find the right solution, and I'm not overly worried that junior theater will dissipate or have any slide. So. Is that
I think so.
Did you have any other questions?
Is it a capital improvement
Oh,
project?
oh, yeah. So, yes, circling back to your original question. Right now, it's likely, yes, there will be some funding built into that dependent on the direction we get from council. But at this point, until we know if we need to do any sort of set aside for a permanent build or modification of an existing site, there's nothing in there right now, but it would be a CIP, it would be a capital project, yeah, funded through the CIP primarily.
Do we want to move on to your director's report or have?
Yeah, well, that was my big update.
Jerry?
Oh, you got a query question, Jerry?
You know, you can still use the stage
Yeah.
for a long period of time, am I correct?
Yeah, that's a good point. So part of the conveyance, the developer has no intention of using the actual theater building, the old chapel, and is willing to let us to continue and Junior Theater Inc. to do their main stage shows in there indefinitely. So that's one of the things with looking at the interim. We sort of have some flexibility to where we don't necessarily need a theater. We need the day-to-day studio space and carpentry shop and scene shop and costume storage and all that. It's not ideal because it works better symbiotic on the same campus, but at least it's an option. So in the short term, continuing to use the Nice Wonder Theater, we can, yeah,
Until we get a new building, and then it'll work out just great.
right. Yeah.
Do you want to?
The only other thing I was gonna update you on is the Halloween parade. Annually, the city does a Halloween parade, and we have a float. And we always invite you and anybody who wants to participate. Jessica is our Halloween diva. She does it all. And I think this year's theme is, or do we not wanna let that out? Because it's, well, we have a stiff competition with the fire department. We usually don't like to divulge what our theme is gonna be, because I'm sure Lieutenant Solis is probably watching this meeting, probably not. But anyway, our theme is gonna be The Nightmare Before Christmas. And if you are so inclined to come, the parade is on October 27th. And that's a Sunday, and you can meet at the corner of Pershing and 4th at 1:30 if you want to walk or ride on our float and be part of the Halloween parade.
And you do survive.
We do.
Yeah, it's a fun experience, so come on down. Hopefully the weather will be nice, right? Okay, shall we move on to, actually, we've got written staff reports, and so taking a look at those, are there any additional information requests in regard to the report? Clear, right? Everything's there, that's awesome, that's awesome. So, that is good. Now,
Wendy, Becca has one update.
okay, please, yeah.
Because I know it has been, we've had questions about it in the past. The new flex area for the Centennial Dog Park is up and running now. The fencing was installed, and we have benches and seating have been added. And the Centennial Dog Park itself, so we're gonna call that now the Centennial Dog Park West, and Centennial Dog Park East is the new one. Centennial Dog Park West will be closed the week of the 28th to install the agility and obstacle equipment. And then once that is done and reopened, we'll be installing a few pieces over at the Robin Creek Dog Park as well. So I just wanted to give you guys an update about that.
Great. Well, that was one thing that I had thought about is, once the agility is up, can those experts, trainers or whatever, could there be an intro to the new equipment as a family event? You know, here they are, but this is how you do this equipment to have success, not only for you, but your animal. Would that be possible?
We actually just had Purina reach out to us about doing collaborations with us, specifically with the dog parks. And then Amanda Randerson, our event supervisor, has been doing a lot of partnerships with the Humane Society. So we have like a doggy Easter egg, a doggy egg hunt. We're gonna have Dogs Day in the park. We're gonna do a doggy trick or treat next year. And so I can definitely pass that on to her about possibly doing that in the springtime when once the weather gets better.
Okay, thank you. Any other things? What about Chris? You're on, Chris. And then,
I knew you weren't gonna skip me.
no, I have you right here.
Yeah, Riverfront Commission ran through a lot of lease things. It hadn't come out yet at the meeting. It was mentioned that the diner lease was coming to an end, but then they are closing. That's come out since. And so we haven't gotten a lot of email updates as far as what the next step is there. The Freight House roof has been under construction and should be done by the 1st of the month. And then Estes Company is working with Riverfront folks on basically a project list of what all else the Freight House needs to bring it up to standards. And then the Marquette Street docks that have been damaged are gonna be repaired by Public Works, but by the time they get done, it'll be time to take them out for the year. So they're just gonna go in next year, and hopefully everything will go well for that. The fall concert series in Quinlan Court is over halfway done now, maybe all the way done. It was halfway done as of the meeting. And then they're doing the Freight House After Dark event again at the Freight House on October 11th and 12th in the evening. And they'll have a bunch of extra events there. And then we got a little report from Churchill on the Friends of Veterans Memorial Park. They have 5 or 6 more projects they want to add to that area. They're kind of working with city staff on getting permissions and plans and everything on those. And they have a fundraiser going on where you can buy bricks with people's names on them, and they'll be under like a covered roof at some point. And then I had mentioned from our last meeting that there was talk of a new volunteer tracking system and maybe some future new volunteer opportunities. And there was a lot of interest in that from basically the whole Riverfront Improvement Commission. And then Angela Stone in particular is one of their members. She works with a nonprofit, and she, I guess, in her previous home in Oklahoma, I want to say, had worked with the Parks Department on a adopt a park type of deal, and she had basically coordinated that through her nonprofit, and she's really willing to get involved. Like, seems like really willing to spend a lot of time helping out with that. So that might be something you want to connect with her. But just most of the members of the Riverfront Improvement Commission seemed willing to like donate some time to spend some time in parks or whatever, once those opportunities are available. So I think there's a pretty big appetite for that. I mean, these are people that obviously get involved in things, but I think there's an opportunity for that overall throughout the city where people will be excited to try and help out and try and prevent some of the vandalism and other stuff. But as far as Riverfront, a lot of Freight House stuff, and then all those events coming up, and that's about it for me. Unless anyone has any questions.
I have one. Where does the money come from to renovate the Freight House?
They put in CIP projects just like Parks does. And I mean, they have a budget because they have a bunch of rent that comes in from, you know, the spaces in the Freight House and spaces in Union Station and stuff like DeLua and things along the riverfront. But that's considerably lower than it was 10, 20 years ago when there were more industries and the casino down there. So they do have income that goes towards upkeep and stuff on those buildings. But for big capital projects, they basically have to ask for CIP money. And that's something that was kind of neglected over the life of the Freight House to where they're kind of behind on that. And that's what they're looking at. Riverfront's trying to come up with kind of a master plan for the Freight House as far as what are the best tenants to fill this out that'll all work together and be open more hours and help each other succeed. And then also what do they want as far as electrical? Because there were issues with some of the spaces where you'd plug in 2 things and it would blow the circuit or whatever. So that's where they're working with Estes to try and come up with not necessarily a wish list, but a project list for that, bringing the Freight House up to where it should be.
I understand that there has been some repairs down there, which has shut down some businesses down there to a certain point of time frame, and they tried to get it fixed themselves, and they couldn't do it because the city had to do it. Is that something?
I mean, that sounds.
Is that because of the city owns the building?
Probably. I mean, yeah, they're the landlord of these businesses. I mean, I'm sure there's some, in the leases, it talks about what they can do, or they have to get permission from the landlord essentially to, you know, before they start tearing out walls or putting in new electrical systems. But I hadn't heard about that specifically. I know they had to repair at the west end of the Freight House. There was a brick wall on top that was leaning that everyone was pretty frightened about. And so that kind of had to be emergency repaired. And then the roof needed to be repaired, and that's what's working on now. And then they've done a little bit of stuff along the north side along River Drive.
Who is the speaker for that? I mean, who is really basically in charge of that, or is that just the Riverfront Commission as a whole?
Yeah, the Freight House, they've got their Riverfront Engagement Coordinator, whose name is escaping me at this very moment, that I'm sure
Stephanie Bly.
Stephanie Bly.
I got her name down here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Stephanie is the staff liaison to the Riverfront Improvement Commission, right? Yes.
They also had another higher level staff liaison that's moved on from the city, and so I think,
Courtney Jones.
right, Courtney Jones, Bruce Berger has been sitting in meetings, but he's not, I don't think, the long-term answer to that. And then Denise Winnetka, the new communications person, has also been sitting in the last 2 meetings, but I'm not sure what the plan is for a long-term kind of higher level representative.
Previously, it was Steve Aarons.
Yeah, I
For a
knew.
long, long time.
Yeah.
And when Steve moved on, it's sort of been shuffled around to various
Yeah.
staff. So Stephanie would be the primary person who works the
She'd be the
closest with
contact
them.
person.
Yeah, if you wanted a staff contact. Or
She could definitely connect you with anybody higher if needed.
Yeah, I
but
think she's the Riverfront Engagement Coordinator.
Yes, she's the day-to-day person that's gonna show up at events and.
So initially, she was brought on while Courtney oversaw or was the liaison. Stephanie's role was to basically be their event coordinator, plan like the concert series and other things.
Yeah, her background comes from theater.
She actually worked for us at Junior Theater.
Okay, I seen that.
So, but when Courtney left, they didn't backfill that position and sort of, right now Stephanie is
I was doing my.
covering it right now.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready to move on to our cherished advisory time? We've been busy, knowing about lots of activities and connections. So is there some, suggestions that we could develop during our advisory time? I guess not at this time. Be thinking about that, We've got budget going, but, pretty soon, unbelievably, we'll be working with the spring and all of that. So what I would say at this time, not hearing for additional comment, will entertain a motion for adjournment. Is there one? Okay. Yeah, it's been so moved, right? Yeah, okay.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn this meeting of October 17th. Indicate yes,
Yes.
no, or abstentions. We know we want to go. So have an enjoyable fall and see you at the Halloween parade. Yes.